Priest rejects a woman before the Virgin Mary, and a miracle shocks the church. Father Michael had served St. Catherine's for 20 years, and in all that time, he'd never witnessed anything that shook his faith. He was a man of routine, of doctrine, of unwavering certainty. But on that crisp autumn morning, when Sarah Bennet walked through the heavy oak doors, with tears streaming down her face, something shifted in the universe, something he couldn't explain, couldn't control, and couldn't deny. She came seeking comfort, seeking guidance, seeking the mercy she'd been taught God freely gives. Instead, she found judgment. Father Michael's words cut through her like shards of glass. The church cannot absolve those who refuse to acknowledge their sins. He turned her away, right there before the statue of the Virgin Mary, his green vestments rustling with the finality of his decision. Sarah's hands trembled as she clasped them in prayer one last time. She looked up at Mary's serene face, tears blurring her vision, and whispered a prayer from the depths of her broken heart. And then it happened. Something that would change everything. Something that would challenge every certainty Father Michael had built his life upon. The candles flickered, though no wind blew through the church. The air grew heavy with the scent of roses, though no flowers bloomed nearby. And the statue, the centuries-old statue that had stood motionless since the church's founding, moved. What happened next shocked everyone in the church and spread like wildfire through the community. If you want to discover the miracle that changed Father Michael forever, subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and comment below with your city or country. Let's share this incredible story around the world. St. Catherine's Church stood as a monument to faith in the heart of the small town of Meadowbrook, its Gothic spires reaching toward heaven like prayers carved in stone. For generations, families had been baptized, married, and mourned within its walls. The stained glass windows cast rainbow light across worn wooden pews, and the scent of incense seemed permanently woven into the very fabric of the building. Father Michael Thornton had dedicated his entire adult life to serving this parish. At 52, his dark hair had begun to silver at the temples, and the lines around his eyes spoke of countless hours spent in prayer and study. He was respected, even revered, by his congregation. They saw him as a pillar of moral authority, a man who knew the scriptures inside and out, who could quote canon law with the precision of a scholar. But respect had, over the years, hardened into something else. Father Michael had become rigid, unyielding in his interpretation of faith. He saw the world in absolutes, right and wrong, saved and damned, worthy and unworthy. Grey areas made him uncomfortable. They suggested uncertainty, and uncertainty felt too much like doubt. Sarah Bennet was 34, a single mother who worked 2 jobs to support her 8-year-old daughter Emma. Life hadn't been kind to Sarah. She'd made choices she regretted, carried burdens she couldn't share, and walked a lonely road that seemed to grow darker with each passing year. Yet through it all, she'd held on to her faith like a lifeline, believing that somehow, somewhere, there was grace enough even for her. On this particular morning, Sarah had reached her breaking point. The weight of guilt, shame, and exhaustion had become unbearable. She needed to confess, to unburden herself, to hear that she was forgiven. She dressed Emma in her Sunday best, dropped her at her mother's house, and drove to St. Catherine's with her heart pounding in her chest. The church was nearly empty when she arrived, just a few elderly parishioners lighting candles in the side chapels. Father Michael was preparing for morning mass, arranging the altar with meticulous care. When Sarah approached him, her voice barely above a whisper, requesting to speak privately, he saw the desperation in her eyes, but instead of compassion, he felt suspicion. "Father, I need to make a confession," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "I've carried this burden for so long, and I can't do it anymore." Father Michael studied her face with cold assessment. He recognized Sarah, of course. She attended Mass irregularly, always slipping in late and leaving early, as if ashamed to be there. He'd heard rumors about her, whispers from the more judgmental members of his congregation. Divorced. a child out of wedlock before her marriage, financial troubles, the kind of life that suggested a pattern of poor choices. "Come to the confessional after Mass," he said curtly, turning back to his preparations. "Father, please." Sarah's hand reached out, almost touching his sleeve before she pulled it back. "I've been trying to come for months. Every time I get close, I lose my courage. I'm here now. Please, just a few minutes." He sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. "Very well, follow me." But Sarah didn't want the dark anonymity of the confessional booth. She wanted to kneel before the Virgin Mary, the mother who understood suffering, who understood what it meant to watch helplessly as the world inflicted its cruelties. She moved toward the side altar where Mary's statue stood, illuminated by dozens of flickering votive candles. Father Michael followed, his irritation growing. This wasn't protocol. This wasn't how things were done. Sarah knelt before the statue, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned," she began, and then the words poured out. A confession raw and unfiltered. She spoke of her failed marriage, of the abuse she'd endured, of the affair she'd had in a moment of desperate loneliness, of the abortion she'd had as a teenager, terrified and alone. She spoke of her failures as a mother, her crushing debt, her constant fear that she was fundamentally broken, unworthy of love, human or divine. Father Michael's expression grew darker with each revelation. When she finally fell silent, exhausted and trembling, he stood over her like a judge pronouncing sentence. "Do you truly repent?" he asked, his voice cold. "Yes, Father, with all my heart." Repentance requires more than words, Mrs. Bennet. It requires a sincere commitment to change, to turn away from sin completely. "I'm trying, Father, every day. I'm trying." He shook his head slowly. "You speak of trying, but I see no evidence of transformation. You continue to live in ways that contradict church teaching. You use contraception, do you not? You've divorced and refused to seek annulment. You work on Sundays rather than attending Mass. These are not the actions of someone truly seeking God's grace." Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. "I work on Sundays because it's the only shift that pays time and a half, Father. I need that money to feed my daughter. And the church's annulment process costs thousands of dollars I don't have. I'm doing the best I can." "The best you can." His voice rose, echoing through the empty church. "The best you can would be to order your life according to God's commandments, regardless of the cost. Your struggles are a consequence of your choices, Mrs. Bennet. The church cannot absolve those who refuse to acknowledge their sins or make amends for them." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. "I'm here acknowledging them right now. I'm asking for help, for guidance, for mercy. Mercy must be earned." The words hung in the air like a curse. Sarah felt something break inside her, some small flame of hope that had kept her going finally extinguished. She looked up at Father Michael, seeing not the representative of Christ's love she'd expected, but a man armored in his own righteousness, utterly unreachable. "The church teaches that God's mercy is infinite," she whispered. "God's mercy is infinite," Father Michael agreed. "But his church has standards. Those who flagrantly violate those standards, who show no commitment to reform, cannot receive the sacraments. I cannot in good conscience grant you absolution. You may pray here if you wish, but until you demonstrate genuine repentance through concrete action, there is nothing more I can do for you." He turned to walk away, but Sarah's voice stopped him. "Wait." She struggled to her feet, her legs shaking. "You're saying that God won't forgive me? That I'm beyond redemption?" "I'm saying that you must prove yourself worthy of forgiveness." Sarah turned back to the statue of Mary, tears streaming freely now. She fell to her knees once more, not in formal prayer, but in absolute desperation. "Holy Mother," she sobbed, "if Father Michael won't hear me, please, please hear me. I know I've failed. I know I'm broken. But I'm trying so hard to be better, to give my daughter a life worth living, to find my way back to grace. Please, if there's any mercy left in this world, let me feel it. Let me know I'm not completely lost." Father Michael stood 10 feet away, watching Sarah's breakdown with growing discomfort. He told himself he'd done the right thing, that maintaining the church's standards was more important than offering false comfort. He'd seen too many people seek easy absolution without true contrition, and he wouldn't be party to that deception. But something in Sarah's prayer disturbed him. There was no performance in it, no attempt to manipulate or guilt him. It was the cry of a soul in genuine anguish, stripped of all pretense and pride. For a brief moment, Father Michael felt a flicker of doubt about his decision. Then the candles began to behave strangely. At first it was subtle, a synchronized flickering that caught his eye. All 47 votive candles around the Virgin Mary's statue seemed to pulse with light in perfect unison. Father Michael frowned. Perhaps there was a draught? But the air in the church was perfectly still, almost unnaturally so. The temperature dropped suddenly, noticeably. Father Michael could see his breath misting in the air, though it was a mild autumn morning. The scent of roses flooded the space, so intense it was almost overwhelming. His frown deepened. There were no roses in the church. The altar flowers this week were lilies and chrysanthemums. Sarah had gone silent, her head still bowed, her hands still clasped. She seemed unaware of the changes happening around her, lost in the depths of her desperate prayer. Then came the light. It started as a subtle glow emanating from the statue itself, a soft radiance that seemed to come from within the marble rather than reflecting the candlelight. Father Michael's breath caught in his throat. He took an involuntary step backward. The light grew brighter, pulsing with a gentle rhythm like a heartbeat. And then, impossible, absolutely impossible, the statue moved. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. The Virgin Mary's carved hands, which had been positioned in prayer at her chest for over 200 years, slowly, gracefully extended outward toward Sarah's bowed head. The marble seemed to become fluid, alive, warm, with an inner light that defied all natural explanation. Father Michael's mind reeled. He was a rational man, educated in theology and philosophy, trained to be skeptical of so-called miracles. Every instinct screamed that what he was seeing couldn't be real. Statues didn't move. Marble didn't become flesh. These things simply didn't happen. Yet he couldn't deny the evidence of his own eyes. Sarah finally looked up, drawn by some instinct she couldn't name. When she saw the Virgin Mary's hands extended toward her, bathed in that ethereal light, she gasped. The expression on the statue's face, carved 2 centuries ago by an Italian master, seemed somehow different, more compassionate, more alive, more present. "This isn't possible," Father Michael whispered, his voice hoarse. But it was happening. The light intensified, and for a moment Father Michael could have sworn he saw the statue's lips move, forming words he couldn't hear, but that Sarah seemed to understand perfectly. Tears continued to stream down Sarah's face, but they had changed character, no longer tears of despair, but of wonder, of joy, of recognition. The moment stretched, suspended outside normal time. The church seemed to exist in a bubble of holy presence, cut off from the ordinary world. Father Michael felt simultaneously terrified and awestruck, his carefully constructed worldview crumbling like sand. Then, as gradually as it had begun, the phenomenon subsided. The light faded, the hands slowly returned to their original position, the temperature normalized. The scent of roses lingered but grew fainter. Within moments the statue appeared exactly as it always had, ancient marble, beautiful but inanimate, positioned precisely as it had been for 200 years. Sarah remained kneeling, but everything about her had changed. Her face radiated peace, a serenity so profound it seemed to illuminate her from within. She whispered, "Thank you," so softly Father Michael barely heard it. He stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he'd witnessed. Every theological training, every rational argument he'd ever learned failed him. There was no explaining this away, no rationalizing it as trick of light or overwrought imagination. Something had happened here, something that transcended all his carefully maintained boundaries between possible and impossible. Mrs. Patterson, one of the elderly parishioners, had been praying in a side chapel. She emerged, drawn by some instinct, and saw Father Michael standing pale and shaken, Sarah kneeling in radiant peace before the Virgin Mary statue. "Father," Mrs. Patterson called out, concerned, "is everything all right?" Father Michael couldn't answer. His throat had closed with emotion he couldn't name, fear, wonder, shame, awe, all tangled together. Sarah rose to her feet with a grace she hadn't possessed minutes before. She turned to face Father Michael, and when their eyes met, he saw something in her gaze that made him want to weep. Not anger or triumph, but simple compassion. She looked at him with the same mercy he'd denied her. "Did you see it?" she asked quietly. I don't know what I saw," he stammered. "She heard me," Sarah said with absolute certainty. "When you wouldn't listen, she did. When you turned me away, she welcomed me. I felt it, Father. I felt forgiven. I felt loved. Not because I earned it or deserved it, but because grace doesn't work that way. It's freely given, remember? That's what you used to preach." Her words struck him like physical blows. "That's what you used to preach." When had he stopped believing in grace? When had mercy become something to be rationed rather than lavished? When had he become more concerned with maintaining standards than welcoming the broken? Mrs. Patterson approached cautiously. "What happened here? The air feels different." "A miracle," Sarah said simply. "The Virgin Mary moved. Her hands reached out to me." Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened. She looked at the statue, then at Father Michael for confirmation. He wanted to deny it, to provide some rational explanation, but he couldn't form the words. His silence spoke volumes. News of the miracle spread through Meadowbrook like wildfire. By the afternoon, the church was filled with curious parishioners, all wanting to see the statue, to hear the story, to witness something extraordinary. Father Michael found himself besieged with questions he couldn't answer. "Is it true, Father? Did Our Lady really move? What exactly did you see? Is this a sign? What does it mean?" He retreated to his office, overwhelmed and shaken. Bishop Raymond called within hours, having heard rumors already circulating through the diocese. "Michael, I'm getting calls about some incident at your church. A statue moving? Please tell me this is exaggerated gossip." Father Michael slumped in his chair. "I wish I could, Your Excellency. I witnessed something this morning that I cannot explain. I've spent the last 6 hours trying to rationalize it, to find some natural explanation, and I simply can't." There was a long pause. "Tell me everything." Father Michael recounted the morning's events, trying to remain objective and precise, but even he could hear the tremor in his own voice. When he finished, the bishop sighed heavily. "This is serious, Michael. If word gets out, and it clearly already has, we'll have pilgrims, media, skeptics, and chaos. The Church has very specific protocols for investigating potential miracles. You know this could take years to verify, and most alleged miracles are ultimately explained by natural causes. I know. Can you say with certainty that what you saw was supernatural in origin?" Father Michael closed his eyes, seeing again that impossible moment, the light, the movement, the presence that had filled the church. "Your Excellency, I'm a skeptic by nature. I've dismissed dozens of claimed visions and miraculous events in my career, but what I witnessed this morning, I believe it was real. I believe something holy occurred in my church, and I believe it happened specifically to rebuke me." Another pause. "Rebuke you? I turned that woman away, Bishop. She came seeking mercy, and I gave her judgment. I told her she needed to earn forgiveness, and then the Mother of Mercy herself intervened to show me how wrong I was." The bishop's voice softened. "Tell me about this woman." Father Michael described Sarah's situation, her confession, his response. As he spoke, he heard his own actions through different ears, and shame washed over him. He'd been cruel. He'd weaponized his position and his theology to wound someone who was already suffering. "I see," the bishop said quietly. "Michael, I'm going to send Father Thomas to assist you for a few days while we sort this out. He can help manage the crowds and the questions. In the meantime, I need you to do something." "What's that?" Find Sarah Bennett. Apologize. And listen to what she has to say about her experience. Father Michael found Sarah at her small apartment 3 blocks from the church. When she opened the door and saw him standing there, still in his clerical collar, something flickered across her face. Not fear, but wariness. "Father Thornton." "Mrs. Bennett, may I come in? I promise I won't take much of your time." She hesitated, then stepped aside. The apartment was tiny but spotlessly clean. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator, and a basket of folded laundry sat on the worn sofa. Emma was at the kitchen table, working on homework. "Emma, honey, go to your room for a few minutes, please," Sarah said gently. The little girl looked at Father Michael with frank curiosity, then obeyed. When they were alone, Sarah crossed her arms defensively. "What do you want?" "I came to apologize." The words felt both difficult and necessary. "What I said to you this morning was wrong. How I treated you was wrong. You came seeking help, and I failed you completely." Sarah's expression didn't soften. "You didn't just fail me, Father. You told me I had to earn God's mercy. You made me feel worthless at the exact moment I needed to feel loved. Do you have any idea what that does to a person?" "No," he admitted. "I don't. I've never been in your position. I've never had to struggle as you have. Never faced the choices you've faced. I've lived a comfortable, privileged life, and from that position, I had the arrogance to judge you. I'm deeply sorry." She studied his face, searching for sincerity. "What changed?" "The miracle. You believe it was real then?" "Yes." The word came out firmly, without hesitation. "I saw something impossible this morning, Mrs. Bennett. The Virgin Mary moved. She reached out to you when I wouldn't. And in that moment I understood how far I'd strayed from the faith I claimed to serve." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "She did reach out. I felt it, Father, not just physically, but spiritually. I felt embraced, accepted, loved exactly as I am, broken pieces and all. I felt what grace actually means, not what I'd been told it means, but what it really, truly means. Will you tell me about it, please?" They sat, and Sarah described her experience. She spoke of the warmth that had enveloped her, the sense of profound acceptance, the wordless communication that had nevertheless been perfectly clear. She'd been told, somehow, that her struggles didn't make her unworthy. They made her human, that her efforts to provide for her daughter, to survive, to keep trying despite everything, were seen and honored, that she was loved not because she was perfect, but precisely because she wasn't. "I've been carrying so much guilt," Sarah said, wiping her eyes, "about my divorce, about my past, about every mistake I've made, and in that moment, I felt it all lifted away, not because my mistakes didn't matter, but because mercy is bigger than mistakes. Love is bigger than failure." Father Michael felt tears on his own cheeks. "I've forgotten that," he whispered. "Somewhere along the way, I replaced the gospel of grace with a gospel of achievement. I started measuring people's worthiness instead of celebrating God's generosity." "Why?" Sarah asked, not accusingly but genuinely curious. He thought about it, really examined his own heart for the first time in years. Control, maybe. If grace is truly free, truly unconditional, then I can't control it. I can't be the gatekeeper. My role becomes less important. And maybe I was afraid. Afraid of what? That if grace is real, if it's really as big as we claim, then I might need it too. And needing grace means admitting you're not sufficient on your own. It means being vulnerable. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 broken people beginning to understand they weren't so different after all. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "The bishop is investigating the miracle. There will be questions, possibly from Rome eventually. The church will be crowded with people wanting to see the statue. That's not what I meant. What happens with us? With the people who come to you broken and looking for help?" Father Michael met her eyes. "I learned to offer them what was offered to you this morning. Real mercy, real grace, real love. No conditions, no earning it, just freely given." The investigation into the miracle at St. Catherine's Church continues to this day. Hundreds of pilgrims have visited, many claiming their own experiences of grace and healing. The statue itself has been examined by experts and shows no signs of having been manipulated or altered. The Church remains cautious in its official pronouncements, as it must, but those who were there, Father Michael, Sarah, Mrs. Patterson, know what they witnessed. Father Michael is a changed man. His homilies now speak less of judgment and more of mercy, less of earning and more of receiving. He's become known for his compassion, for his willingness to sit with people in their pain, rather than standing over them in judgment. Some of his more conservative parishioners grumble that he's gone soft, but the Church is fuller than it's been in decades, filled with people who'd given up on faith because they'd been told they weren't good enough. Sarah continues to attend Mass, no longer slipping in late and leaving early, but sitting in the front row with Emma, both of them confident in their belovedness. She's become a counselor at a women's shelter, offering to others the grace she received. And the statue of the Virgin Mary, it stands as it always has, hands in prayer, face serene. But those who pray before it swear they sometimes catch the faint scent of roses, feel a warmth that has no earthly source, and leave with the certainty that they are heard, they are seen, and above all, they are loved. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and share it with someone who needs to hear about grace today. Comment below with your city or country and let us know how this message of mercy resonates with you.